And I think we should thank, obviously, Auntie Gloria for that heartfelt warming to country. I still think it's incredible that areas of national cultural significance, there's still no legal obligation in New South Wales to take those into account in key developments. It's really quite phenomenal. Anyway, welcome everybody to the Connecting for Regional Disaster Resilience Symposium. My name's Mark Evans, and I'm the proud Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research here at Charles Sturt University. And before I begin, I'd like to make the most important acknowledgement of all today. Today we gather on the lands of the Wiradjuri people and recognise their thousands of years of custodianship of lands and waterways that make this country so beautiful. And I'd like to recognise their unique contribution to our environmental and cultural heritage, past, present and future. And I extend my respects to all Aboriginal people and their elders in attendance here today. Now, after 2 years of the corona coma, it's wonderful to be able to come together to share our research ideas with the community of practice in disaster resilience and businesses. Over today's proceedings, we'll have the opportunity to see the work of Charles Sturt researchers and researchers at Southern Cross University in generating evidence-based and impactful research that contributes to the university's social purpose, Yindiyamara Wanangana, the wisdom of respectfully knowing how to live well in a world worth living in. Over the last year, we've launched an historic investment strategy in research here at Charles Sturt. We're calling this Top 200 by 50, and that's been underpinned by an initial $50 million investment to reach our strategic goal of being a sustainable, world-class, research-driven university in the study and practice, with an emphasis on practice, of cyber, food and water security, central, of course, to our deliberations here today, and environmental and social justice and regional well-being, as they represent the key challenges for our regional communities. And our obligation as a university is to provide high-quality research and education to help our communities respond to those challenges. Now, rather than give you an introduction to the university's research agenda, which tends to be the norm, I thought it would be much more useful to share some of my research findings with you from an applied research program that I led during COVID-19. And this focused on the delivery of the National Emergency Relief Programme through what's called the National Coordination Group. And this was a particularly interesting piece of applied research because it really crystallised around an argument. And the argument is that we should understand collaborative governance between Commonwealth, state and territory governments, and in particular through local governance as a core democratic value. And while the rest of the world really over the last 30 years has moved decisively towards localism, unfortunately in Australia, we now have the most centralised federal state in the world, right? And in my view, that is representing a major barrier to the achievement of the problem solving that we require through our communities to affect the challenges that you're focusing on this morning. Now, supply-side theories of trust tell us that public trust corresponds most with the trustworthiness of government, right? And in a different program of research, I asked Australians in 34 different deliberations across Australia what they viewed to be the key characteristics of trust. And they identified them as integrity, open and honest government, empathy, right? That government cares for the communities that they serve and the issues that communities have. And finally, delivery. That trust is all about delivery. So therefore it's the performance, the supply of government that matters most in orientating the outlooks of citizens, together with a commitment to procedural fairness and equality. So in a book I published last year, towards the end of last year, with Jerry Stoker, it's called Saving Democracy, we term this condition of trusted government performance legitimacy. And it emanates from the public's assessment of the government's record in delivering public policies and services. So nowhere is this greater exemplified and tested than in times of crisis. So where public services themselves become a critical space for building trust between government and citizen. As Paul Tahar puts it, crisis provides real-world stress tests to the resilience of political systems. Now, so basically, before I came to Charles Sturt, I led the Democracy 2025 initiative at the Museum of Australian Democracy, where we surveyed Australians on a regular basis about trust in people in government and the reforms that they wanted to see to strengthen their democracy. And that research is now informing the new Strengthening Democracy Task Force. But you can see that the evidence tells us that there was a very significant trust spike at the outset of COVID-19. And that's largely because in times of crisis, citizens want to lend support to their government for prudential reasons. But we also see that there was a huge collapse in support, which was largely to do with the lack of delivery in relation to the vaccine rollout and the ability to engage effectively through community in post-COVID recovery. Okay? Now, we have a new government that's enjoying a honeymoon period in terms of trust, but Australians are expecting this government to deliver on that post-coronavirus recovery process. So the evidence tells us that Australian citizens have very high expectations of the quality of service provision, and they expect jurisdictions of government and service providers to collaborate effectively in the delivery of those services. Right? So if you look at most of the survey data on how Australians understand their government and the services they receive, there is a big emphasis on expectation for collaboration. And yet, as we know, the record of federalism has worked against effective collaboration and collaborative governance. So we argue in the book Saving Democracy, Jerry and myself, that the quality of collaborative governance should be viewed as a core democratic value and methodology for trust building at different levels of government. So what did this particular research programme focus on? Well, I was brought in largely due to the work that I've been doing in the social policy arena that challenges what is called the dominant Westminster principal agent model. So that's basically the top-down, Commonwealth government knows best approach to the delivery of public policy across Australia, right? And this was a really open-minded organisation when it was set up, and they wanted to practice best practice collaborative governance, right? And because of the research that I'd done in this area with the Department of Social Services, through the redesign of business.gov.au, Better Outcomes Framework for DSS, and then later the Vaccine Rollout Task Force that adopted the collaborative governance approach, I was brought in basically to help design the National Coordination Group. Now, the definition of collaborative governance is here, and you'll recognise this. It's about cross-sector governance arrangements between government and non-government stakeholders, including business, to carry out a public purpose designed to approach complex social problems with diverse stakeholders. So the problem is uncertainty. The issue is the complexity of getting networks of stakeholders on the same page in terms of crafting a common mission. So you see that the terms of reference for the National Coordination Group of Emergency Relief was to ensure the effective distribution of emergency relief, including food relief nationwide during COVID, to identify opportunities for national and local cooperation and coordination, and to provide advice to the Minister for Families and Social Services on areas of greatest need and what is working on the ground. So this is what I call the sort of institutional design of this form of collaborative governance. You can see that all the ministers in the Department of Social Services were involved, and the different divisions within the Department of Social Services, but also it involved all the national CEOs from all the service providers across Australia. Right? So this was quite unique in the sense that these actors were brought together into a collaborative setting. What was even more unique is that we used a meta-analysis of best practice in collaborative governance to inform their approach to their work. And this was the first time that this had happened. And essentially, my role, and this was what I call an action learning research project. So we were generating research that was directly integrated into decision-making processes, right? So it wasn't that traditional form of research where you throw a research project to a consultant or to a research group and then 9 months later you get back the findings. This was about integrating the findings from the research directly into the decision-making process. It started with identifying the barriers and enablers to action that were experienced by all the participants. We then co-designed a vision, mission, norms and values, and then across the lifetime of this programme, we engage in ongoing self-assessment and research projects through monitoring and evaluation to ensure continued focus on collaborative action. So what were the key attributes that emerged from this work? Well, in the final evaluation, we saw that there were sort of 4 critical success factors. The first was favourable starting conditions. So that was using co-design as a principle of default, identifying barriers and enablers to incentivise collaboration, establishing a common vision and values to provide collaborative purpose. We also had facilitative rotating leadership, right? So again, this wasn't about the Commonwealth Government sitting in the principal agent position. This was about sharing power genuinely across state and territory actors and also delivery agencies. There was a big focus on co-governance to drive collaborative problem solving and collaborative processes to deliver valued shared outcomes. I'll circulate this presentation, but you can see that there's a lot of sort of analysis around the quantitative and qualitative work that we did to enable us to identify critical success factors for different actors within the broader ecosystem of decision-making and delivery. But essentially our key findings were that this type of form of collaborative governance is an effective way of achieving trust-building purpose and delivering agreed outcomes across our federal system. That collaborative governance was highly valued by its members and close stakeholders. However, what was conspicuous in its absence was the perspective of service users, who still continually tend to get locked out of these national programs, and also remote emergency relief providers were conspicuous by their absence. And actually, the next stage of this research is actually to engage users in co-design processes that actually militates against that cookie-cutter approach. It's based upon localism, local identity, and understanding local needs, and developing networks of support to deliver on those needs. So the key finding that emerged from this was the importance of the principle of co-design by default being extended to all levels of delivery to ensure that collaborative governance achieves its democratic obligation. And localism is key to affecting that in future disaster and emergency resilience. So look, I thought I'd share those ideas with you from that research, because it does show that there is some glitter out there in terms of progress, in terms of ensuring that we have a much stronger and orchestrated culture of collaboration in the delivery of services to ensure that we're able to respond and adapt to these crises. Thank you.